Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. So I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon once again. My name is Martin Basiri. I'm founder and CEO of Passage, one of the leading AI companies in Canada. Today we have such an exciting topic for you to share. As I said, they're estimating that AI is going to be as much as 13% of world GDP. That's $15 trillion. That's 7 times Canadian GDP. Whoever decides to win right now, they can win big. And the people who don't want to be part of the game, they're going to pay 15% tax on every dollar they spend because all those money are going to go to the winners. But more importantly, our education industry, our healthcare, our infrastructure, everything going to be completely reinvented with AI. And you can be the user of it or you can be the inventor. And as a country, we have a big decision to make. We can be the leading player, or we can be moderate player, or we can watch on the side and pretend that we are the player. And the choice is ours. The good news, we are early to the game. So we still have that choice. And today you will hear a lot about it. But before we begin, I would like to recognize the sponsor partners who make the conversation like this possible. Today's event is proudly sponsored by EY and PwC Canada. Thank you so much. To our season sponsor, Canadian Banker Association and the Carpenters Regional Council, thank you. Air Canada is official airline sponsor, and Canada's Forest Trust is the nature partner that's helping us to reduce our carbon footprint. We are also pleased to welcome students from University of Toronto and TMU today. I wanted to be here when I was a student, right? It's like amazing. And now, let me take a moment to remind you that our website, it shows all of the events that we have. Please be a member of CanadianClub.org. You get a lot of perks. And you also help us to, this is a not-for-profit, you are helping us to bring conversations like this for you. And I'm sure many of you will have a lot of questions when John and Tom are going to talk. And there's a paper in your, on your table. And for those of you who are online, you can use the question button and ask your questions, and we will give it to the moderator. And a speaker introduction. So, 11 years ago, I started my company in Waterloo. I couldn't speak English. I was a kid from Iran, just graduated from University of Waterloo, and you hear these big giant names, and one of the names that in every single conversation you hear as one of the, like call it OGs and GOATs of Waterloo, greatest of all time, is Tom Jenkins. Over years, I got to know first his children, very humble, amazing, and I was always like say, who's the father of these people? And I got to know then later on Tom, and everything started to like, I started answering like the mindset and the humble and the knowledge behind those years. I started like calling him when I have a very problem and like I don't know like what to do, just like calling him. I'm with Tom in Business Council of Canada. I meet him like around in a lot of events. The gentleman that you are meeting today, you're gonna like talk about AI, but let me tell you a little on his personality. Optimist. If I wanna like tell you in one word, optimist. You call Tom and he directly tell you what he thinks. He doesn't sugarcoat it. That's how engineers, we like to having it either 0 or 1. Like, you don't have to be nice or whatever, just tell me the truth and he will tell you that way. And it's always like give you the choice. You can go this way, this is how it is, and you can go this way and this is how it is. Always extremely generous with his time. Always care about Canada, is deeply philanthropic human being. And one of the people that I look up so much to you as like a young entrepreneur. Thank you so much for what you've done for this country, for regional Waterloo. And thank you for all the things that you continue doing. And he never stopped pushing everyone, including all our government and everyone, to be better. And our moderator of today actually is John Stackhouse. I know him for a while as well. He's one of the best people in always like creating conversations about the most important things, whether it's our defense, our AI, or climate. So Tom and John, welcome to the podium.
It's good to be around young people who just leap up on stage. It's inspiring, Tom. Really, really excited for this conversation. A lot to get through. But I mentioned this to Tom before. I've been doing this little trick, especially for AI-related conversations recently, which is to do a quick straw poll of the audience. So how many of you here have used AI in your personal lives in the last day? Okay. How many of you have used it in your job in the last day? Close. How many of you are using AI to help run your team, your organization, or your company? Okay, that's good. Numbers on all 3 counts up in the last few weeks even. But Tom, you see the sliding scale there. What does that tell you? We all use this, like, not sure anyone is not using it in their daily lives. Almost everyone now in their jobs. Not as many to help run.
We're on a learning curve. And your response is part of that indication that you're on a learning curve. One thing's for sure, by the time John gets to that 3rd question, all of you better be putting your hands up soon. Because the rest of the world, if we had done this in the rest of the world, they would have all put their hands up. So we're in a bit of a competitive race here, and we're on a learning curve, and we should be very conscious that we're on a learning curve, well, all of us.
And racing, literally, on the learning curve. We'll get deeper into that. But Tom, maybe give us a bit of background, first of all, on OpenText, and then on your own learning curve with AI. First of all, explain OpenText. I think most of us know what a Microsoft is. We know what a Google is. Probably don't know what an OpenText is, but it's as prevalent.
Yeah, that's fair. Many of you know OpenText as being this software company from Waterloo. You know that, and that's all you really most of the time need to know. However, and part of the reason is that OpenText, 98% of what OpenText does with its clients all over the world is outside of Canada. So that's why you don't necessarily know a lot about us. Now, having said that, the other 2% is every major organization, every major government in Canada. So it's just the OpenText becomes so big because it's about $7 billion in revenue. So you're forgiven if you just know that it's a software company from Waterloo, because quite frankly, that's all we've ever told you. However, going forward, you all need to know what we do, and we build data platforms. And in the past, that mattered if you were a regulated industry. So if you were a bank, or you were in consumer safety, or something that had to do with protecting society, that information that we help you store is now the information you're going to train the AI with. And that's why you need to know us now.
And on this journey, you've become much more of an AI company. It's remarkable that OpenText started before really the modern internet, just 35 years ago. Yeah. Give us some insight into what you learned as a leader, but OpenText learned as well to become the AI company that you are today.
You know, it's interesting, and this is especially for those of you from the financial community, in a way, everyone says they're an AI company now. And in a way, they're right. You know, it's like when we used to talk about the internet, and we used to call it the information superhighway and all this stuff. And we used to predict that everybody would be an internet company, and you all did become one. So in some ways, you have to unpack it now. It's not enough to just say, oh, we're an AI company. What are you doing in the supply chain of AI? And so what we do is we don't build the algorithms. We have companies like Cohere or Anthropic. They're the ones that build the algorithms. It's sort of like the movie camera. You know, somebody invented the movie camera, but what really makes the movie camera valuable is, that means I'm gonna do all the talking and he's just gonna whisper in my ear. So the thing to understand about when you say you're an AI company, we are the fuel that goes into the algorithm or the robot, if you will, because the robot has to be trained. And for those of you that are lucky that you come from a regulated industry, well, all that fuel is there because the government required that you keep it. Many of you know if you file your taxes with CRA, you have to hold your financial returns and all the information for a prescribed number of years. We've got lots of accountants in the room. They'll tell you how many years by jurisdiction. The point is, all of us in this room have the fuel that needs to go into that robot. So when we say we're part of AI, you have to figure out what part of the AI. So the way to think about OpenText is we keep all that data for you. We organize it. They call it curated. So we organize it and make it ready so that when you're ready to train some what would be called agentic AI, and we'll maybe talk about what that means, that data, OpenText has been collecting it for 35 years. And believe it or not, you know, Canadian company from Waterloo, we are the largest storage of all the information in the world. Not Microsoft, not IBM, not Oracle, not SAP, OpenText. So this little company in Waterloo actually has, and you can go on ChatGPT and Gemini and stuff and just query who has the most information available for training AI, and it'll come up OpenText. It's really quite remarkable. So that's what our role is. Our role is the fuel that goes into training all of these bots.
And you're clearly on the front lines of what's moving fast in AI globally. I wonder if you can give us that global perspective on how Canada is doing. We've talked a lot over the last couple of years, particularly about the slower pace of adoption here. We published a report at RBC last year on, it's called Bridging the Imagination Gap. So just Google RBC Thought Leadership and you'll find Bridging the Imagination Gap there. So that offers some insights, but a lot's changed in the last year.
Yeah.
How are we as a country, as a business community doing?
So we are a reflection of our society. And perhaps I was at a conference, the G7 Digital Ministers, a few months ago, And it was interesting to reflect on how different societies had responded to AI. And the EU responded by legislation. They put in all kinds of rules. The Americans, the Wild West. The Asians, somewhere in between. Canada, mostly somewhere in between. And the consensus at the room, and this is coming from the Europeans, is, boy, did we ever get that wrong. Because just like Martin was saying earlier, it's tantamount to putting your head in the sand, and that's what the EU did for a year. They're now undoing all their restrictive legislation. Now, that's not to sing the praises of the American approach, because the Wild West can have its own danger, as we've seen. Canada, we're somewhere in between, given our adjacency to America, and that's a reflection of our society. Our society is sort of half in the camp of Europe and half in the camp of America. So we're sort of in the middle. In terms of our competitiveness, we have all the tools. There are very few countries like Canada that has both a Cohere and an OpenText. And it also has an amazing company with the Royal Bank, because Dave McKay, John, myself, and others, the Royal Bank has taken a wonderful leadership role. Now, I have many friends at TD and Scotia, and they're all doing this as well, CIBC, et cetera. But Dave McKay really took a leadership role in this, got together with Cohere early, and started to do that. That's the exception. Unfortunately, Canada generally, everyone in this room, we should be aware, this is not a race that we should be late to. I'm going to kill myself with all the metaphors here. We should not be late to this game. And as each month goes by, we're in danger of being more and more late.
If I can add to what you've just said, leadership from the top always matters. Yeah. It is super important in AI. So my boss, Dave McKay, he's building his own agents now. He's a former, still a computer guy. It's what he loves to do. But that's sending a signal through the organization. So everyone below him and below them is moving at a faster pace, I suspect, because of that. But we're also seeing, it's important for Canadians to recognize, yes, it's nice to be somewhere in the middle, but there's a bit of a growing school of thought that, the Goldilocks scenario, not too hot, not too cold, something in the middle. Well, maybe in this race, Goldilocks would be dead, because there is no safe middle ground. And we're starting to see that in economic performance across sectors. It's early days, but in the United States, sector next to sector next to sector is growing in productivity faster than we're seeing in Canada, certainly faster in Europe. Maybe that's AI, maybe it's other things, too early to tell, but it's an indication that things are starting to accelerate in the economy that is fastest to adopt.
There's no question that all of us have experienced what John just said. You do not use multiple platforms. You have a search engine that you'll use, you'll have social media that you'll use, you'll have some kind of email system, but you pick one. And what John's getting at is in AI, it will absolutely go the same way. And so if you're in the middle of the road or you're a laggard, you'll miss the whole thing. So it does matter. And it's complex in the sense that we don't know how different societies will restrict and block things. You know that in this country, we're starting to do harms legislation for our youth to make sure that certain social media algorithms they're not exposed to. That's a great theory. How are we actually going to implement it? The Australians just came out with legislation. So there's a bit of a tug of war going on, but one thing's for sure that John's getting at, if we are behind, we're losing.
And rest assured, but don't rest assured, there's lots of other very savvy people around the world eyeing probably what each of us.
Well, I was in a meeting in England about 4 weeks ago, and the Europeans said, hey, we're going to spend $64 billion in the EU over the next 10 years on AI. And the Americans said, oh, good, we're spending $64 billion this month. Yeah. Okay, so think about that and where Canada should be.
So let's talk a bit about what organizations and leaders in those organizations need to think more deeply about, starting with the tech stack. Many people still conflate agentic, so let's get back at what agentic is with ChatGPT or whatever your favorite kind of consumer AI app is. As you deal with a lot of business leaders, organizational leaders, government leaders included, how should they be thinking about the tech stack more broadly, and then also what agentic is doing to that?
So we are creatures of media. All of us are, whether it be social media, old style media, et cetera. And almost all media concentrates on the sort of Skynet Terminator 2 scenario of this big, huge computer in the sky, and they scare us all and what have you. And the thing is there's truth in it. It's not that it's not true. The debate about a generalized superintelligence is a real thing, for sure. But for the rest of us in this audience, we're really speaking not about the sort of the, if you imagine in your mind, the very top right part of a curve, you know, that goes from bottom left to top right. We're actually down in the bottom left. And in the bottom left, that's really, let's call it dumb robots, you know, kind of thing. And they're robots that do one thing, and they're an agent. And so then we call it agentic AI. All of you in this room need to know agentic AI. That's a key thing, and you all got a book, and at the beginning of that book, it goes through and tells you what is essentially a very focused, restricted AI, because that's what you're going to be using in business. If you've got somewhat all of you have already dealt with agentic AI in one way or the other, but in the media, they don't really talk to you about the little robots. They talk to you about the big Skynet kind of thing that's depends on what books you read, et cetera, but it's Big Brother if you're a 1984 person, or you're Skynet if you're a T2 person. The point is that that's not what we're talking about. And it's really hard to get through to everyone. But let me try and explain it this way. MIT came out with a study of the first year of AI deployments, and they studied the ROIs. And the ROIs were a colossal failure. 95% of the projects failed. And it's sort of like, what's all this AI stuff about if 95% of the projects fail? My favorite story in the report was where they took ChatGPT, so OpenAI, and they applied it to the drive-through at a Chick-fil-A in America. And it was a disaster. And the reason why was the ChatGPT is a super brain. It's generative AI, it's a super brain. You've all used it, you all put your hands up. The reality is if you give a super brain the job of, I'd like to order, you know, dark chicken, 2 drumsticks, etc. When you say the word chicken, that can have all kinds of meanings to a superintelligence. And a ChatGPT is not even a superintelligence. The point is, it needed to be trained to just do the job of taking your order and processing it. But because they started with such a huge thing, they had to restrict it down. The better approach is to train it only what it needs to know. A way to think of it is, say you use the word transmission, and you walk into a hospital. Well, that word transmission, hantavirus, etc., has a meaning. You walk into Canadian Tire and you say transmission, that's got a completely different meaning. So context matters, and you've got to have it focused. The problem with the public AI is they have all the contexts of the world. They have no idea what you're going to ask them, Claude, ChatGPT, etc. So they have to know everything about everything. And you want that, you demand that. But if you're in the drive-through line on a Chick-fil-A, you're just ordering chicken. That's all you want the robot to know about. And it's that subtlety that the book goes through and discusses. How do you train it to just do what you want that role to be?
And maybe another analogy or use case to share is, I mean, search is wonderful, we all use it, but search is a fairly straightforward linear function. It's why Google has been able to shift so quickly with Gemini. I had a fascinating conversation with the leadership of an LLM in the Valley. It's only last fall, and we were talking about the business model and where the money would come from to pay for the billions that they're investing. And the executive said, you know what the number 2 revenue source is for Google? It's Booking.com. Travel search, which we all know is just a straight, you're just going to search every hotel in the world and find out the best deal and serve that up. And it was like, you're going to take out Booking.com? Yep. And suddenly that's like hundreds of billions of dollars of value. So for all of us thinking about our business, is there a linear function that's kind of the equivalent of search, AI, and not even a sophisticated level of AI? It's where the agentic starts to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
It becomes very powerful.
And so the key thing to take away as we peel the onion of what AI is, the amazing thing, and OpenText actually began as a search engine. In fact, in its first 3 years, it was the most used search engine and website in the world. And we decided to go inside the firewall because we figured out that most of the information is inside the firewall. In fact, a lot of you may or may not realize that 90% of all the world's information is inside the firewall. That's why OpenText manages more information than anyone else in the world, including Google, including Facebook, et cetera. So the first thing you have to go to is, oh my God, all that information is actually not available to you. Because you don't want your health records or your personal financial information. You don't want the, I don't know, the safety manual for a Boeing 777 that you're about to get on be available to a terrorist. Like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be inside the firewall and secure. So if you take that and you go back to what John was talking about, what we found in the early days of search, we tried to do conversation. What you now take for granted, we call that natural language query. I can tell you in 1996, 97, 98, we tried to get all of you to query in a full sentence. But we couldn't do it. We didn't have the compute power and the algorithms. So the one thing to realize about AI, it's actually 2 things that happen. We had 2 revolutions happen. One was the ability to talk to a computer in English, in French, in German, in Japanese. It understood language. It was enough compute power that it could understand language. But the second thing, and this is what John's getting at, is it wasn't just the ability to understand what you said, it was the ability to actually process what you said and do something about it. So there's 2 parts to an agentic AI. It can talk to you, but then it'll do something. It has enough that it can, and we call that a rational engine. So it can, now it's not creative engine, so all your jobs are safe, you know, there's a lot of commotion about that. It can't create, but it can replicate what happened before. So it's got the world's most amazing memory kind of thing. So you've got to think of it as 2. When you build your agentic AI, you're gathering information, but then you're also asking that agent to do something with it. And then to maybe go one step further, because the book will take you through this, then you do orchestration, where agents talk to each other. And we would call that, in the days of humans, workflow. But in the days of agents, it's actually orchestration. So part of the reason why you want to read that book is it demystifies all this nomenclature for you. All what you know is valuable. You're subject matter experts in things. Learn the words, learn the nomenclature, learn the architecture, and you'll be fine in your jobs. But you do have to learn this.
And I've read the book. It really is worth reading. It's not technically challenging. It's a good read, so highly recommend it. Tom?
And one of my co-authors is here, Shannon Bell. Where's Shannon? Okay, she's the brains behind this. Come on, Shannon, stand up. So if you have really hard questions, John, ask her.
Tom, who's doing this well on Agentic? Maybe share some examples of who out there is
in this country,
excelling.
Royal Bank. Absolutely.
Besides our,
Thanks
for the
people.
help, but
I don't say that because you're standing here, but because they are.
I'm sitting.
Or sitting. Sorry, I'm making him very uncomfortable now. He's so Canadian. But the reality is, the Royal's done a fine job, and they're building agents. I was on a panel with Dave McKay a couple weeks ago. Dave's got agents that wake him up in the middle of the night. He's got agents that are waiting for him in the morning. And, it's amazing what he's done. And that's leadership, but it's also having the vision. All of you can do this if you have the courage, you have the vision, you have to have the capital in some regards, but you need to do it because there's another saying, if you will, about agentic and about AI. You won't lose your job to a robot, but you will lose your job to another human using a robot. So be careful.
So those other humans who are using the robots, what are they doing, the ones who are doing it well, that we should all learn from, both from just an operational point of view, but also from a management and leadership point of view?
They took their inspiration from the MIT study. The smart ones know the only way they'll be competitive is if, that's a lot of questions. Holy smoke. Okay, so
speed up the answers. Let's go.
Okay, so the short answer is use your own information and don't let anybody have it. Let me repeat that. Use your own information inside your organization and never let it outside your organization. Now that's easier said than done, because your CIO's got to figure out how to do it. We happen to know how to do it really, really well, but you have to learn to do that. If you give your information away to a hyperscaler or whatever, they now have it. They don't need you anymore. They know everything you know. And so you have to be really careful. You have to make sure that information that is proprietary to your organization, boy, you better safeguard it, because it's all you've got going forward. It's all you've got. It's that legacy of knowledge of how to run the Royal Bank. They've had more than 100 years of knowledge of how to do it. They must never give that to somebody, because somebody could come along, create a digital bank, take all the 100 years of knowledge, and away you go. So you have to be careful with this. Don't give your information away. And a lot of the players in the industry, they want your information.
They really want it.
They really want it. So be careful. Nothing is free.
Let's use that as a segue into the questions around tech sovereignty, both for a national level, but I also think about it from an enterprise level. Sovereignty doesn't mean isolation. It's not an island. The RBC example is perhaps helpful because we're a big user of Cohere, but we're also a very big user of Anthropic and others. That gives us optionality, which is important in any business. It also gives us a bit more control, which is what sovereignty is. So we're not trying to shut out foreign operators. In fact, we work with them without giving them our data to help design something that is ultimately good for our customers, but also gives us that security, which is
so all of you know what John's talking about by a simple word called sovereign cloud. That's what it's actually unfortunate that we've gathered around that term, because it's a misleading term. Because it's sort of like what I told you about holding on to your information. Don't hold on to all of the information. You got to hold on to the stuff that matters the most. Now, and so we can take this at a country to country level, and then we can take it at an organizational level. Okay? And I'll give you the first clue. At an organizational level, it's actually way bigger than the country level. So all of us think about it about countries. It's actually, the corporations actually have this problem much bigger. Gartner did a whole study on this. But let me start with the country stuff. So Canada, France just basically restricted American hyperscalers from France. Well, they may regret that one day, because the hyperscalers are what allow their companies to be creative and to be competitive. And it's not that simple to just say, everybody go away. You have to nuance it. Now, we happen to have an expert in the crowd all this stuff. Janice Stein, you got to stand up. Janice, come on, stand up. If you want to, oh, is Jackson here?
Yeah, Jackson.
Oh, Jackson, you got to stand up. Okay.
Yeah.
So Janice and Jackson, stand up. Have you got the report?
No, I left it down there, but people can.
Okay. So, Eamon, can you wave the report? I gave you my only copy. Okay. So that is the report. As you can imagine, I have to go around the world a lot and to talk at public policy conferences about what John's asked about. From first time, I've been doing, I don't know, 35 years, something like that. First time I'm in another country. Actually, it's happened to me 3 times now. I'm in another country and they go, oh, the Canadian paper, that's the way to do it. I'm hearing Asians say that. I'm hearing Europeans say that. I'm hearing Americans say that. And it's the Monk paper that Janice and Jackson, who stood up, and Sean, they knocked it out of the park. If you really want to understand, and they've coined a phrase called managed dependence, we are absolutely going to work with the Americans. They're our greatest ally. Despite all the stuff that goes on, they are our ally, and we're lucky to have them as an ally. We're always going to work with them as a country. I'm an Air Force officer. I can tell you, NORAD, NATO, you know, when we go into a fight, we want the Americans right with us, for sure. So what they did with the Monk paper is they understood the subtleties of, if we're negotiating a trade agreement, well, of course we've got to keep that proprietary as a negotiation as an ally. So they've come up with this idea of hybrid. And this idea of hybrid is the right way to do this. It's not all or one. You want to pick what is most important to a country and then to an organization. Now, I called out Eamon a minute ago. So my adult supervision now at OpenText has arrived about 3 weeks ago. Eamon Antun, you got to stand up. You got to stand up. Come on. So Eamon has come up with an amazing word instead of sovereign. And I told him that I would shamelessly copy everything he's been teaching me. And by the way, we're so lucky to have Eamon come home. Eamon, he's got more cousins in Kitchener-Waterloo than I do. And so, of course, Eamon built his career outside the country at IBM and rose to be #2 IBM Americas, #2 at IBM, and he came home. And he's now the new CEO of OpenText for about 3 weeks. So he's still learning all the nomenclature, but of course at IBM, he knew all these things. And Eamon came up with an amazing word for this topic for all of you in the room: choice. Yeah. Choice. It's not sovereign, it's choice. John used a similar word: optionality. Royal Bank figured out, yes, for some things we want Cohere, some things we want Anthropic, and maybe for something else, we'll have something else. The point is choice. That's what you want to achieve, choice. And be clever about where you set up choice. But if you don't plan for choice, then you're stuck. And you're reconciled to some kind of monopoly. And so you really want to ask yourselves in your management teams, are we giving the corporation or the government choice? That's such a powerful word.
So a variation of this question has come in from the floor, which is the choice between LLM and LLM, large language model, limited language model, or small language model.
SLM is
how do you think through balancing those, hybriding them, or sticking with one approach versus another? Okay,
so we're on a continuum now. Okay, remember that metaphor I was trying to use? It's in the book, by the way, in the first chapter. But you go from like a so-called dumb robot all the way to something that's smarter than us, right? So you're on a continuum. What John's referring to is the very lower left, and it's a small language model. And as you would think, it actually speaks about a very limited number of tokens. And then you get to an agentic, which is starting to use a large language model. And then you get to ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, where they're using billions. And then when you get to superintelligence, you're probably quantum computing trillions of tokens. Okay, so what John asked is about something down on the very lower left. Here's an amazing thing for all of you to realize. You're being told in the media that you need a nuclear reactor to run these things. No, you don't. If you're down where John is at a small language model and you're not using rich media, do you know you can use the lowly, inexpensive, widely available CPU chip? You don't need GPU chips. You don't need a nuclear reactor. You don't need to shut all the lights off in Windsor while you do this, right? So this is a very important point. Don't over-specify your robots when you're designing them. Do the minimum required, the minimum power, the minimum function calls. It's cheaper, and it still gets the job done. Don't use a sledgehammer as a fly swatter.
It's such an important management decision. I mean, we're seeing this at our RBC and probably have learned through doing.
And all the tech guys, they want you to use all the expensive stuff. Don't.
And users want that as well. We all want to drive a Ferrari, but if I need to, come up with 5 questions to ask Tom Jenkins, I can use a pretty simple version of a lot of tools. Our trading desk needs a very specific and powerful tool that's going to consume a lot of energy. That's fine. There's a whole business model for that, but we're getting better and better, I think, at differentiating through the management ranks. And then you raise a really important point about helping your tech partners or your AI partners in the organization, as well as with vendors and partners, understand that this table has very different needs than that table, and Monday's needs may be different than Friday's needs.
So me and this guy, we've been talking about this stuff for years. So what's starting to happen, we're starting to use a shorthand with each other, because we've been talking about this for a long time. Can I give you a sense of something? We've been studying this, and every one of you, every human, needs about 5 agents to do your job. It's not 1 agent to 1 human. But the flip of it is that every agent can probably do about 100 humans. So when you work all that through, and when John is saying to you, fit for purpose, an agent, what he's doing at the Royal, they're starting to work their way through the whole genome of the Royal Bank. The book you've got is the genome for all of Canada, okay? Imagining an Agentic Canada. Now, if you take that 5 robots for every human, and you take 100 humans for a particular robot, if you go through an org chart of a company, 100,000 person firm actually is the equivalent of about 5,000 agents. And the book goes through all that. So I'm not trying to give you a headache, but I am trying to invite you into the shorthand world that John and I are in, because you really do need to start thinking about it this way.
How do you think about your agents as a workforce, as a team? Our friend Dan DeBow has a wonderful expression which he uses, which is he tells people, Agentic is like 10xing your workforce. So if I told you, and he says this to people on his teams, you are allowed to add 10 extra headcount today, go for it, but it's all agents. And it's to challenge people, but it also requires a very different management brain to do that.
So you've just described, you'll see on the side of your book, there's a 2. There's a 3rd book coming, and I'm writing it with Eamon, because Eamon's, he's one of our most accomplished managers Canada's ever produced, gone to the States, run big company. And General Fraser is also on the board of OpenText, and so he's one of our most decorated Army generals, was the general in charge of Afghanistan, et cetera. And the 3 of us are going to write a book on this topic about how do you manage the robots beside the humans. And it's not as simple as you would think, because it's not like a laptop or your phone. It's much more interactive than that. And so you'll just have to wait for book 3 to come out, but it'll be about managing Agentic AI. And Eamon is deep into that with Shannon about how they run OpenText. Just give you an idea, just to root you in the impact of what John has said. OpenText is around 7 billion Canadian in revenue. And generally, a decade ago, that would have been about $100,000 per person. So that would imply about 70,000 people. Well, OpenText doesn't run with 70,000 people. It runs with 20,000. So what happened to the other 50,000? So first of all, we never hired them because we were doing what Dan Davio was talking about. We were already investing. At the time, we called it predictive analytics and things like that. And I asked Eamon and Shannon if they would write another book just on OpenText to give everybody an idea about what you're getting at. OpenText is already living this. It's creating, for a company of $7 billion, I have to do the math in my head a little bit here, it's creating almost $3 billion of cash flow. Think about that. Its EBITDA is around 35%. It's a stunning number. And that's one of the biggest cash flows in Canada. And yet, it's not the biggest revenue in Canada by far. And yet, it's a super efficient company. So when we talk about productivity in Canada, et cetera, I know Linda Hasenfratz always likes to say this at Linamar, our companies that compete in the world, they're just as good as anybody else in the world. And so OpenText, because it does most of its business in the world, it's hyper efficient. So you do want to learn about this, it matters.
So we've got just a few minutes left and a couple of questions I want to get to. One's just come in from the floor on Mythos.
Okay, Mythos.
How scared should we be?
Scared's maybe the wrong word. Prepared. You need to be prepared. You need to anticipate. And the reason Mythos, our head of cyber, again, we just got a hard question for me. Should be Shannon that's answering this. But Shannon taught me the other day a really important lesson. And you should all take to heart what Shannon taught me. In the old days, you would have 100 days to react to a patch or something like that. And then as AI came in, Shannon, you do like 13 billion cyber attacks a day. Do I have that right? Roughly? So go talk to Shannon after. She's managing 13 billion a day. She's got a security operating center in Waterloo that's like, beam me up, Scotty. You should see this thing. But they manage 13 billion a day. What she taught me is that in AI, when it first started coming out, they had to use AI against AI to keep up. And it went from 100 days to 30 days. With Mythos, you may be down to hours. And so you have to organize, you have no choice. You have no choice. You have to organize yourself so that you anticipate this so that you can react quickly. And if we're in a world of AI, you better be using AI to counteract Mythos.
Last question. Everyone leaves here today, gets back to their day jobs and exciting challenges out there. What's the one thing we should all keep in mind when it comes to AI as we charge out back into
Well, I brought some books to illustrate that question. Because you should realize you've got the one on Canada, here's the one on Ireland. There's one on Germany that's being done in Berlin next week, et cetera, et cetera. You're in a race. Arabic, French, German, Japanese, understand you're in a race. We do not have the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean anymore. We are all hyper-connected in this world, and you're in a race. You're in a race. And all our government, there's only so much our government can do to create a society called Canada, whether it's in the banking community. His business is becoming hyper-connected. And the same for most of us in this room. You're in a race, and you're not in a race against each other. You're in a race against a lot of other cultures.
Well, and the great message implicit in that, Tom, and through this conversation is OpenText has been in that race for 35 years. You continue to lead and win.
And you can win. That's a big message for Canadians.
You can do that.
You can win.
You can win the global race. You can do it from Canada, and you can do some amazing things along the way. So another great racer is going to take us to the finish line, and that's our friend Martin Vasiri. Okay. Tom, thank you.
Yeah, let's win because we are winners, Canadians are winners, and we're not going to accept anything by winning. Yeah, let's win. Why not? And we're going to celebrate our winners, and we're going to celebrate our collective win. Before we wrap up, we're going to have 3 amazing events coming. I'm going to say it very fast. On Monday, May 25th, we are welcoming Honorable Greg Rickford, Minister of Indigenous Affairs and First Nation Economic Reconciliation, and Minister responsible for Ring of Fire, Economic and Community Partnership. On Monday, June 1st, we are hosting Canada Food Moment, from ambitious investment to global growth, featuring Justin Henderick of Farm Credit Canada and Alison Sundstrom of NYA Ventures, with Ivan Fraser, the University of Guelph. And on Monday, June 8th, in the evening, we host our annual Pride event entitled We Form Subsects to Spotlight of LGBTQ+ stories as we screen. I want to thank our media team, VVC, for all what you do, and our sponsor, EY and PwC. Members and guests, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. I hope you are leaving here so much smarter and more grateful for who we are and cheerful for future. Thank you.